Hello, welcome everyone to this week's office hour with myself, Professor David Hanak. Really nice to have you here and following on the last week's session. I really enjoyed our discussions. I do hope that you will find those sessions helpful. This is an unofficial way to kind of engage, ask questions, get advice on your careers, on your academic careers, consultancy careers, but also skills development. I also want to use those sessions to share some of the updates behind my work, behind my research. So I do hope that you find those helpful. I just want to double check whether you can see me and whether you can hear me. So tell me in the comments whether that's all right. And tell me where you're joining from. I just want to learn about where you're coming from, what are your kind of aspirations, right? So tell me where are you coming from today. I can see some of people are already started. They're already starting joining, so really great to have you. I've got a list of activities that I would like to go through today. And briefly, I will start with an answer to the past questions, right? So once I hear from anyone back, so if you can just send a like, or if you can just tell me if you can hear me, you can see me, that would give me a nice kind of overview of kind of, the indication that everything works correctly. From my end, it seems like it, but you know how the technology works. So I do hope that, let me just see, because I can see myself in the background somewhere. Oh yeah, over here. Yeah, I think it's working based on what I can see on my LinkedIn. But yeah, if you can tell me in the comments, that would be wonderful. So what I'm going to do now is I've got a couple of notes from the past session as well, and I know Isabel did ask about my kind of thoughts about the COP29 and in terms of the new carbon mechanism that was kind of implemented. So what are the main results? What are the main outputs out of this discussion, and what is the new carbon mechanism that everyone is talking about right now? So when you look at the COP29, what was agreed and what was kind of approved was the Article 6.4 of the Paris Agreement that actually deals with how the greenhouse gas emissions are being kind of traded between the companies. So that new carbon mechanism, what it means is that the countries can now trade and implement national kind of action plans, and they can trade their emissions. But the key aspect of that is those emissions would need to be they need to be verifiable, right? So basically, what it means is there's a mechanism now in place where a company can trade emissions or offsets, which is the negative emissions, between different countries. So, for example, if you have a company in one country and they reduce their emissions or they offset their emissions over there in that specific country, they will have those emissions credited to them. So they will have a kind of account with emissions. What they can do with those negative emissions or the offsets, they can basically sell them to another company in another country. So that means that another company would be able to use those purchase offsets from the first company to balance their carbon footprint and in principle support achieving their net zero targets. So how this could impact the countries in the global south, that was another question. It all comes down to I think, price of carbon. Naturally, the primary goal of this is to allow more negative emissions. That's my opinion. It's to allow more negative emissions into the network, into the system. So what you can do is you can trade them. If you generate more, you can trade them, get some benefit of that, but also help others decarbonize. That's the ideal state. I would imagine this all comes down to the price of carbon. So we would need to make sure that there is a viable price of carbon for different countries. And I know there is in the EU, the cross-boundary carbon adjustment mechanism has just come in place. So that's what it basically aims to do. So it aims to determine the price of carbon between it accounts for the difference in the carbon price within different regions. So at the end of the day, that global carbon pricing mechanism, kind of carbon market mechanism, would need to account for the local economic conditions, because if you capture CO2 from the air with very expensive technology, some countries it might not be feasible to use that, and they might miss out. But if we have that adjustment mechanism, that could support those countries to decarbonize as well. So I do feel like, that is a positive development to have that global carbon market, and for now voluntary, but at some point I do hope that it will become more kind of obligatory carbon market, where you would basically need to demonstrate that you've got enough offsets to balance your operations emissions, potentially supply chain emissions as well. But that is, I believe that's coming as well. So really glad to have that question. It kind of, this session's actually forced me to read stuff, so I like it already. So that was the answer for one question that kind of left from last session. What happens now? I mean, what I have a few updates, and I want to kind of use them as a learning opportunity as well, where I want to give you an advice on potentially how I approach things and how you can learn from that. Hopefully, I just want to make sure you can see me, you can hear me. I hope that is working now, because I couldn't see the comments. I think there is something about it that doesn't work again, but that's all right. I can see 3 comments over here. That's fine, no worries. That's right. That's fine. I'll just leave it as is. I'll double check the comments in a second. But if you have any questions that you'd like me to answer or discuss, more than happy to answer your questions or have that catch up. An answer, I did some thinking about those sessions, and obviously I want those to provide value. So what I might do from the next session or the following session is to actually have teams around those office hours, where we would do a short intro about a specific topic, and then we can discuss really. So it's more interactive. It's more kind of, the intro would be as a food for thought, and then we'll talk about the issues, challenges, and questions around this area. So that's what I'm thinking. As I said, those sessions are I want to keep them very informal and open. So if you've got any questions, do let me know. So from the update side, I will have a brief section where I talk about the updates. So had a paper published, which is quite nice, in Oxford University Press and the Clean Energy Journal. And that paper actually looks at how calcium looping or carbon looping, that's technology I've been working on for quite a while, how it can help us transition from carbon emitting technologies to carbon negative technologies without the need for modification of the existing technology itself. So the case study I looked at was a coal-fired plant, because it's still the most emitting type of emitter. And what happened there in this work, I looked at integration of carbonate looping with biomass firing in the calciner. I'm happy to do a more detailed sessions on this, and I'll most likely do so. But the main idea is you don't have to, the main outcome really is for the entire process to become net zero, you have to capture about 80% of CO2 from the flue gas and co-fire about 30% of biomass in the calciner. So that is very marginal amount. And what I've shown in this work was also that because you have a few levers you can play with, so you can reduce the capture rate, increase the biomass rate, and so on. you can actually reduce the cost of capture by about 10% with that additional opportunity there. So that's something that I'll be sharing soon. I'm likely to do a session dedicated to this, or webinar or something. But yeah, so that's again. Let's if you would like to present some of your work, let me know as well. Just what I'll mention that, happy to share a link if you're interested to read the paper. I've just dropped it onto the comment section. I did share it on my LinkedIn a couple of days as well, so you've got access to this. It's open access, so you don't have to pay for it. Another activity that I'm heavily involved in is obviously writing proposals. So as an academic, you would be writing proposals almost on a daily basis, in addition to teaching. So proposal writing, or any kind of writing in academia, is a critical skill to develop. I'm not talking only about papers and proposals, but also thinking about the broader audience. How do you engage with policymakers? How do you engage with industry? You do need to learn how to write this kind of pieces, like briefs or industry briefs, policy briefs, social media posts as well, to raise the visibility of your research. So how the issue that I used to have when I started writing more is, how do I focus on writing? Because how do you focus on writing? The issue I had was how to focus when I'm writing. The issue is really because when you're writing several pieces at the time, you do really need to think about how do you keep that your mind on a specific piece, rather than going from one to another, kind of cross-pollinating some ideas. So having that clarity of thought on what to write and how to write it is quite critical. So I did a paper writing framework, paper writing webinar some time ago, but I'm happy to do it again. But highlight, kind of reflecting on that at a higher level, I do have a couple of steps that I usually go through when I'm writing, whether that's a proposal, whether that's paper. So the first thing that you have to do, or I have to do as well, that I do in general, is you do have to understand the guidelines for the specific piece of work that you're writing. So look at the article, journal, advice for guidelines for authors, look at the call documents, and so on, because that gives you all the requirements that are necessary for you to actually meet the requirements of that specific piece. I then do a breakdown of my work. So I don't tackle everything at once. I do a very detailed outline for each piece of work. So basically what I do is I look at the structure of the document that I need to write, break it down into chapters, subcomponents. And then what I do, I look at each component separately and I break it down again. So I've got two levels to break down. And what I do then is I kind of put bullet points under each of the subcomponents, so that I know exactly what I have to write. Why it helps? It does help me to find the focus on one piece of component, one piece of writing at the time. But also it helps me streamline my writing process, because I can see the entire piece break down into components, and I can see whether they link nicely, whether they flow nicely, whether something needs to be rearranged, or whether I am missing any sort of information based on the guidelines that I've read before. So that's why I break it down as the first thing. I then focus on one piece at a time. And what I tend to do is I tend to snip a good practice examples. So if I write a paper, I started writing papers. I read quite a lot of another papers by another authors, so I could basically understand what the good practice is, what the good structure is. I do the same for proposals. I do the same for any other piece of content that I write. So that good practice or successful examples help me streamline the entire process. Once I have a draft of a specific chapter or section, I'll go back to the guidelines to make sure that I tick all the boxes in the guidelines, because otherwise, what's the point? And at the end of the day, once you do all of that, you go through the guidelines, you're happy with it, I always ask someone else to verify whether I've done the good job, right? So that means having a colleague read through your work, having a peer read through your work, or having a peer review potentially. Because at the end of the day, when we write and we develop texts, we tend to assume things. We tend to go not we cannot really understand beyond what we focused on. Really, I don't know how to explain it, but asking for feedback kind of gets us out of that zone, so gets us out of that focus and can reveal some of the issues that need to be resolved. So I hope this helps. I hope this gives you an idea of how I write and also how you can improve your writing. So I'm looking at some of the questions now. So Christopher asked, can you use ampersands in a thesis? I don't understand the question, but if you can let me know what you mean exactly, then I'm more than happy to answer this. Yeah, let me know. I'll answer in a minute. So earlier this week, I also shared an article from Nature, so that's the career column in Nature, and that article kind of emphasized that your PhD is your business card. There was quite a lot of discussion around this in the comment section, so I really enjoyed reading those and engaging with you guys. But I think there is some commentary to be done on this, because there was people who were very positive about this and people who were not so positive, a little bit negative about this as well. So I just want to explain my thinking behind this, and I do think that your thesis is a kind of a business card that you would carry on for your career, and that could actually accelerate your career if used correctly. So from my perspective, a PhD thesis is there to actually demonstrate your expertise and your understanding of a specific research area, because you basically did a focus on a specific subject for a long period of time. You did an innovative piece of work, you contributed to knowledge. This is something that you really want to showcase, to emphasize, to build on as a part of your career. So what this really means. So when you basically done your PhD, you defended your PhD, you've done your PhD thesis, you defended your PhD, it basically means that you've built the expertise in your research area, you've done the cutting edge research, I already mentioned that. You've also built a unique expertise in specific research methods, or developed a new research methods for your research area. And if you look at the PhD, then at the higher level, it's basically a compilation of a specific pieces of work, of specific elements. It's a portfolio of your work, if you want to kind of explain it as is. So what you can do with it, you would publish part of your work, potentially, or all of it, if possible, in academic journals. But it also means that you can share software, you can share articles, you can share videos to emphasize to get your work out there, to emphasize your expertise, and to build visibility of your research, your profile. That would bring more opportunities in principle. So in this sense, PhD thesis is your business card, because you want to use it as a showcase of your expertise. I wouldn't expect your thesis to be a part of the application process for your jobs or any other opportunities, unless required. Some opportunities might require you to send a thesis. For example, when I was applying for my or chemical chartered engineer, I had to send an abstract of my thesis because to demonstrate my expertise. So that's what they ask. But sometimes they ask for entire thesis as well. But what I feel like having, what I think like having being useful is kind of splitting your thesis into those smaller chunks and publishing in industrial papers, publishing policy papers, and having that in your CV as an added impact or added kind of visibility of your work, that could definitely help you advance your career. It did for me, and I'm doing quite well right now. So I'm really happy to share some of the insights that helped me grow as an academic. So I do have a couple of questions over here. I don't have any other significant aspects from the past week. It's been mostly spent on writing proposals, really. We did have a visit at Net Zero Center from the Cleveland Engineers Institute, and we did talk about the role of CCS in industrial decarbonisation. So very good discussion, very good kind of questions around why we do CCS, what's the role of CCS versus direct air capture, what value it could bring to the industrial cluster, not only in terms of the reduction in CO2 emissions, but also in terms of the jobs and the benefits to the area. I also did a brief interview with one of the journalists on the next step for direct air capture and what happens, what are the forecasts for the next year. But that is to be that will be available in kind of mid-December, late December. I'm happy to share it once it's available. I can't share any more details for now. Cool. So that's my update, really. So I want those sessions to be kind of interactive. So going to head into I'm going to head into the comment section just to see okay, so Crystal, oh yeah, okay, got yeah, silly question. Yeah, so basically the question is, so my answer was quite silly and the first I didn't understand it. So can you use ampersands in a thesis? So it means the end sign versus the end. It depends, I would say. I don't use it. So in academic writing, you wouldn't use it. You would go with the end rather than the end sign or ampersand. But it depends, because I've seen in a business school thesis, I did see people using ampersands rather than like end. It's all down to what's the requirement of the university. I wouldn't expect ampersands being allowed on majority of university. Didn't see many, but as I said, some of them do have them. I remember from my perspective, when I did my PhD thesis, master thesis, I used an end, so I didn't use the ampersand. But for the assignments, especially when I did my MBA, the ampersand was a normal thing. So again, it depends on, even within the same university, different school might have different policies. So I wouldn't be worried about it too much. All right. So I hope I pronounced it correctly. So Ifedik Chukwu is asking, what are the opportunities to join my research group and as a prospective master student? So I do get that quite a lot recently. Naturally, so Net Zero Industry Innovation Center, we are mostly research and innovation focused. So our teaching is all done within the SCDT, so it's a school of engineering, digital, and technologies, and that school actually of computing, engineering, and digital technologies, and that school handles the master students. So we do have a few master programs in I think sustainable engineering, chemical engineering. We don't get directly involved in teaching. We do support sometimes the master thesis or advanced practice projects. That's mostly in terms of kind of working with industry, working with us to do relevant research projects, so that it's not just another academic project that we think of, but we want to make sure that these projects that you do are relevant. So I can link you with my colleagues who are responsible for admissions or who are course directors for those courses, and more than happy to link you with them, and you can take it from there with them. But as I said, I'm not directly involved in this activity. Thank you for your question, though. Please send me a message as a follow-up. Okay, so Yurvey asking, I have been practicing research and publication for quite a few years. I would say that at least I know academia and research well, people at my stage. All right, so you stuck between PhD or industry. So I need to stick to research, but also at the same time want to dive in industry. What would be your suggestions for me? No, it's fine. This kind of questions are completely fine. So I do want you to get the most of those. So unless these are, inappropriate questions from any sort of point of view, then I wouldn't answer really. But career-related questions, I'm more than happy to answer. Although I want you to make sure that, this is something that you decide at the end of the day. I can only provide my perspective. So looking at, looking at this, so it's basically industry versus academia. Depends, if you're in Germany, I don't necessarily have the right context for Germany, but from the UK perspective, industry and academia tends to work quite well together. So what happens usually is you can do your PhD, and you can then move to industry straight away after your PhD. In many cases, doing that after masters is better because you might end up with a higher salary directly, but in the long term, your opportunities are better with PhD. So it really depends on what you prefer, and there are graduate research engineer jobs, at least in the UK. I'm sure in Germany it's similar, where you basically don't need PhD to do your work, but master research is enough, but you are still a research engineer. So what I've been kind of looking at recently is a combination of the two. So we currently have an opportunity to do a part-time PhD, whether that's in person, so you can come on campus, work for industry, and do your PhD at the same time, part-time. It takes longer, but it is both, really. It's more demanding, though. Another option that I currently have one student doing, it's looking at PhD distance learning. So that's something that we do as well. We do have an option for doing distance learning PhD. It's a part-time option where you can still work in industry and do your PhD from wherever you are. So you don't have to move to the UK physically to do it. I have one student part-time as a distance learning, and I have two part-time students who are working from our local council. So again, it seems like that part-time PhD option becomes more popular these days, mostly because you get to work and you get to do a PhD related to your work as well. So I think that could give you a flavor of the both if you do part-time PhD and work in industry, because at the end of the day, after your PhD, which usually takes about 5 to 7 years doing part-time, you can then decide which direction you want to follow, and you don't close any doors for yourself. I hope this answers your question, but happy to catch up on this after this session. So in general, at an SEO center, as I mentioned, we do mostly research. So we do have open places always for PhD students. The main issue that is there, and we all know it, is with the funding. So we do currently think about how we can leverage that. How we can solve that. The distance learning PhD option is definitely less expensive than conventional PhD, which gives a nice kind of value for money as well for you as a candidate, but also gives you access to our facilities, which is nice. So happy to talk about that as well. I might do a session actually on what opportunities are there to get involved with a PhD studies at TSET Uni. It's quite exciting, to be honest, mostly because we are basically part of the industry cluster, and we do get involved with the projects within the industry cluster. So it means that our projects tend to be more applied, not just on the fundamental level. So some of the examples, I did talk about the projects last time. I don't have an update for the project this week, but I think I'll need to kind of work on that a little bit more. As I said, these sessions are still work in progress. We might end up with a completely different layout in a few months' time, just to make sure that it adds value. But again, feedback from you is encouraged. I can see a few people on LinkedIn as well, a few people on YouTube. But if this is something you want me to do more often, do let me know. Okay. Great. Thank you, Hervé. If you want to catch up on this, do let me know. More than happy to help. So, do you have any other follow-up questions? Any pending questions about your careers, net zero, CCS? If that's the case, I'm happy to answer. I'll stay for 5 more minutes. I can see there's not massive amount of questions this week, but that's understandable. If not, I will finish earlier today because we just want to make sure I don't waste your time. But yeah, I hope these sessions are helpful. Let me just double check some of my notes. If I covered everything, pretty much. All right. Okay, Hervé, let me know if I can help in any way. All right, I'll wait for a few more minutes. So what's next for me today really is I need to submit a paper from one of my mentee, which is on electrochemical CO2 utilization, and obviously I will head back to writing my proposals, which is quite exciting these days. So we're looking at building a demonstration unit for one of the technology that we've been developing for quite a while now. So that proposal is quite big, and I do hope that we'll get it. If not, it's a good learning exercise, obviously, but with proposal writing, you never know. I also think I did mention that already on my LinkedIn, that I'll be doing the techno-economic training. That's something that is in the development right now. I do hope that I will manage to get it out before the end of the year as well. Although looking at the deadlines, it seems quite tricky. I've got a couple of proposals to evaluate, a couple of theses to revise as well. Review. So it might be tricky to do it by the end of this year, but most likely January. That's when we would start with the regular techno-economic training. If this is something you'd be up to doing, let me know in the comments as well. Because again, I just want to help as much as possible. All right. I think there are no more questions. I will just end it for today. I don't want to waste any more of your time. If you've got any follow-up questions after the session, do let me know. I'm more than happy to answer, whether that's through email or whether that's through LinkedIn. Sometimes I get lots of messages on LinkedIn, and that might kind of delay my response, but I'll always try to get through them at least within the next not 24 hours, but within a week or something. So stay with me. Sometimes it's just busy. Anyway, thank you for your time, and see you hopefully next week. Bye.